The story started with a terrible, desperate cry from someone whose face was covered in blood and whose eyes showed evident signs of fear and horror. After that, horrible creatures with flaming red eyes attacked fast and with a scary, fearsome force. As these huge creatures charged ahead, people ran away in all directions, screaming in dread and commotion, and the whole area was filled with fear. A huge explosion happened in the center of the battlefield all of a sudden. It sent people flying and knocked some people down because it was so strong. It caused a lot of chaos on the battlefield. Then a strong warrior showed up. His crimson eyes were full of wrath and might as he swung his sword to fight off the beasts and stop the attack. The warrior kept fighting hard, using his weapon to hit and create huge bursts of energy that pushed the beasts back with great power. Another huge and violent explosion happened, proving how fierce the fight was and making it even more dramatic. Another huge explosion sent a huge beam of light crashing down to the ground, where it had a huge effect on the land and everything around it. After these things happened, the courageous warrior stood tall with his sword, which had a strange and tremendous force that came from it. It was called Eos, and it was the Empire's strongest blade. Then came Death Knight, a sinister figure in beautiful black armor who was scary to look at. A precise attack hit the Death Knight, breaking his mask. The Death Knight looked hurt, bending down and tired, but his fiery eyes still shone with anger and resolve. The Death Knight's eyes became wide in amazement and disbelief as he beheld something that shocked him to the core. The whole scene looked like a fight that had just ended. Flames were everywhere, and the Death Knight was breathing heavily as he glanced around at the damage. After that, a terrible enemy showed there, clapping with joy at how well he had destroyed the wretched Empire. This beast kept relishing the destruction, saying that revenge is better the longer you wait for it. The scary creature stood tall and said that he had finally kept a promise he made 1,000 years ago. He was quite happy to have gotten his revenge. Finally, the terrifying creature's actual identity was revealed. Archlich Dorgos, who had a terrifying skeleton body and eyes that burned crimson. Emperor Hadad yelled at him in anger for slaughtering his people. Dorgos smiled and made fun of the emperor's harsh comments, thinking they were a nice curse. Dorgos said in a mocking way that it was time for his coronation ceremony and that he was done talking. But Emperor Hadad said that it was impossible for someone like him to become king. Dorgos triumphantly said that he had united the continent for the first time in history and that he should be called the new emperor. The former emperor looked completely beaten and worn out, and he fell to his knees in apparent pain. Dorgos then thanked the Demon Kings, the Death Knight, and his commanders for their hard work, which helped him win. He then told them to bring the royal crown forward so he may be crowned. Dorgos' followers, who were waiting for his orders, brought the royal crown. The Death Knight walked up to Dorgos with the crown in hand, showing how devoted he was. Dorgos congratulated the Death Knight in particular, thanking him for his commitment and outstanding help in winning this battle. He then thought about how he could repay him, but the Death Knight didn't say anything, and it was evident that he was unsure and emotionally torn. Dorgos concluded the conversation in a rude and insulting way, saying that the Death Knight was only a slave to him and that the inquiry was stupid. The Death Knight, who looked like he had once been a slave, reached out his hands to the crown and said that serving that body was his greatest joy. But all of a sudden, the crown flew away from him, and Dorgos looked shocked and confused. It seemed like an enormous force had thrown the crown in a different direction. Dorgos' followers were shocked, and their faces showed it. They couldn't figure out what was going on. Dorgos started to channel a huge amount of power, and his hands glowed with a bright red, burning light. His Demon Kings got ready for fight and charged forward to try to stop the Death Knight's attack. Even still, the Death Knight looked quite angry and didn't seem scared of Dorgos or his companions at all. Dorgos was in a state of panic, furiously and confusedly asking what the Death Knight was doing. He was visibly astonished because he hadn't told him to do this. The Death Knight spoke clearly and said, finally, as his actual self, and will began to show through. He said frankly that he was now in full control of his body, and that he moved only when he wanted to. Dorgos was surprised and asked how the Death Knight could talk when he was sure he had fully obliterated his will. The Death Knight, on the other hand, said that his will just seemed to be gone. It had never really gone away. The Death Knight said that he had been stuck inside his own body, watching everything happen without being able to do anything about it. Dorgos, trying to get back in charge, declared that the Death Knight was his best work, and that he would let him let out his rage today only. Dorgos told his Demon Kings to attack the Death Knight all at once in an effort to regain power by force. But the Death Knight stopped the onslaught and used a huge destructive power against them that scared Dorgos. This power generated a huge burst of energy that sent all of Dorgos' followers flying away in an instant. Dorgos was shocked by how strong the Death Knight was since he had beaten all the Demon Kings at once. After that, Dorgos chose to unleash a much stronger spell to take back control of the situation. He used his sorcery to call up a huge army of ghosts and dead people to fight the Death Knight. This army of demons and undead attacked in a fierce and disorganized way, charging for the Death Knight. But the Death Knight kept his ground and fought fiercely, without exhibiting any fear in the face of this huge attack. The Death Knight told the zombie army to stop right now, and he did it with full confidence and strength. Then he gave a clear order for all the demons and undead to kill themselves at the same time. The undead and demons followed this order right away, starting a mass suicide and self-detonation right away. This caused a huge and terrible explosion that almost destroyed everything around Dorgos and filled him with fear. Dorgos was completely shocked by this incredible power and wondered in horror if he had made a monster with strength that was equal to that of the Overlord. Dorgos tried to calm the Death Knight down by saying he understood how angry he was and would feel the same way if he were in his shoes. But in his mind, Dorgos reassured himself that even if his body were destroyed, he could always transfer his soul to another backup body and take control again. The Death Knight then revealed that he had spent all of his long time in prison thinking about how to kill Dorgos. The Death Knight started to amass a lot of energy so he could launch a really strong strike. The Death Knight said he had come up with a special sword move that would kill Dorgos by permanently splitting his soul apart. Dorgos was terrified and couldn't believe it was happening. He knew it was dangerous though, so he opted to avoid the attack for now. He ran away quickly, attempting to get away from a lethal strike that was coming at him quickly. But the Death Knight quickly came up to him and hit him hard from above, making a huge show in the skies. Dorgos went through a peculiar moment of quiet. He looked shaken and didn't want to believe what had just transpired. Dorgos thought for a second that he had lived and started to laugh, saying that the technique was just an illusion. But then, all of a sudden, he screamed in pain and horror as the Death Knight's blow penetrated his body for good. As he fell, a vortex of dark energy formed around him, throwing Dorgos' body up into the air. His body kept plummeting from the heavens in pain and astonishment. Then, because of the blow, his body exploded violently, and the Death Knight remained there calmly watching. Dorgos' broken head hit the ground with a lot of force. The Death Knight walked up to him and told him to go to hell without thinking or showing any pity. Then he lifted his foot and stomped down hard on the last bits of Dorgos' head. The Death Knight stomped on the pieces of Dorgos' head, killing him totally. Emperor Hadad was shocked by what he saw and asked out loud what had just happened. The Death Knight fell on his knees in exhaustion and gently remarked that it was finally finished. The Death Knight made up his mind to do one last act that had to be done in a deep silence. He wished he could see the individuals he had lost, even if it was just in death. He thought he should say sorry to the people he hurt when Dorgos was in charge of him. He could clearly remember what he had done in the past, like how he had once stabbed an innocent person and raised them up with his blade without mercy. He was very sad and sorry, and tears filled his eyes as he silently repeated his apologies to the family he had harmed. In a moment that changed everything, the Death Knight stabbed himself in the chest with his sword, killing himself as punishment for his sins. Damien, a sweet voice suddenly called out to him. He knew it was his sister's voice. He saw a clear picture of his sister in front of him. She gently asked him why he was sleeping there, and he felt a deep sense of serenity. Damien was startled to see that his sister looked young and attractive. He wondered how she could look so young. Then her soft grin took him by surprise. He asked her, surprised, "Why you look so young?" She laughed and wondered if he was attempting to flatter her so she would defend him when their father yelled at him. She told him to believe her and come home right away because it might rain shortly. Damien woke up confused to see his sister sprinting toward their family's house. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He suddenly realized that he had torn down the palace with his own hands. How could it still be there in front of him? Damien was shocked and looked at his hands, wondering if he was dreaming right then. But then he had scary ideas as he remembered Dorgos holding him like a puppet. He wondered if everything he had just gone through was a dream, or if what he was seeing now was a dream. Damien started to mistrust what he was seeing, so he decided to test it himself. He picked up the stick from the ground and headed toward a big rock, hoping that this test would be enough to show the truth. Damien hit the rock hard with the stick, as if he were employing a high-level fighting move. But the stick broke right away when it hit, which shocked Damien utterly. Damien thought it was crazy at first. Maybe nothing out of the ordinary had really happened. But just a few seconds later, the rock erupted with a huge force from the impact of the strike, showing how strong Damien had become. At first, Damien laughed gently because he was shocked by what had happened. But his soft laughing quickly became into uncontrollable laughter, which showed how shocked and disbelieving he was. He fell to the ground, tired and breathing heavily from the shock. He stayed in the rain, his hands clenched hard in pain and stress, trying to understand what was going on. At that point, Damien knew for sure that what had happened to him wasn't simply a dream. It was all true. He smiled widely, even though it was raining, and told himself that he had really gone back in time. Damien started to remember his old life and how he was good at getting into trouble. His family had always said, "He really is crazy." He remembered his irate father yelling at him for embarrassing the family when he was kicked out of a public place for raising a commotion. He also remembered how his brother had been mad at him for assaulting Markley Leon Bloom's kid, which caused a big controversy, and how his brother had yelled at him since his sister Louise had to leave because of his reckless actions. He saw a picture of his sister in a carriage crying because he had ruined her future. He also remembered how his mother cried and asked him why he had so carelessly mortgaged the family's land and borrowed money. Damien sadly remembered that he didn't stop there. His actions cost the family all of their money. In the end, because of all this, his father kicked him out of the house for good and told him never to come back. When he was about to go, his sister Louise stopped him and gave him some money, begging him to be happy no matter what. His sister gazed at him with love and murmured, "Be happy," which made Damien's heart hurt. Damien felt terrible sorrow for ruining his sister's life with his terrible mistakes. He then hurriedly took the money from her hand, pulling her hand away and going away fast, feeling embarrassment and grief that he couldn't put into words. He felt real regret and shame for the first time in his life that day, when he ran away from his family's house. Damien sat on the dirt, thinking about how he had gotten back to the past. He started to remember the last moments of his old life, when he had resolved to say sorry to his family before he died. He had never thought he would really go back in time. He looked up at the platters and pondered if nukes had done what they did. Damien suddenly saw something weird in his hand, which made him doubt even more what was going on with him. Damien sat and thought about how hard it had been for him to learn even the most basic combat moves in the past, especially the one called Shattering Wave. He could clearly picture the approach in his mind, including how powerful and terrible it was. Damien told himself that it was a technique that made a strike stronger and more powerful, giving it incredible, devastating power. He remembered a fight against a strong knight in the past when this move was known as Wallbreaker. Damien told himself that he had learned this skill after defeating and killing that knight. A voice from far away suddenly shouted out, "Young master," and Damien quietly turned to look. He observed a servant sprinting toward him, fast and eagerly coming from the house. Damien stared at the servant and thought about it for a time. He tried to recall his name and wondered, what was his name again? Was it Victor? He paused for a moment and then inquired, "Victor?" to make sure he had the right name. The servant hurriedly and anxiously confirmed that Lady Louise had told him to come back to the house right away and was astonished that he was still outside. The servant hesitantly said that the head of the family was very angry, which made Damien stop and think, did I do something wrong? The servant was shocked by the remark and answered quickly, "No, and are you really saying you don't know what you did?" Damien's face clearly showed that he was confused and surprised. He clearly hadn't remembered what trouble he had caused. "You scoundrel!" A furious voice yelled from within the mansion. It was the voice of the Viscount of Mansion Haxon. When Damien walked into the house, his father tried to hit him, but Damien quickly averted the blow with great ability. Damien's father lost his footing and fell to the floor because he had been so cleanly dodged. He was shocked by how powerful and precise his kid was all of a sudden. Damien glanced down at his father, who was lying on the ground, and screamed, "You really are insane." His father got back up, enraged, and yelled that Damien had been booted out of a bar after starting a huge brawl, which brought shame on the whole family. Damien's mother and sister tried to stop him and calm him down. Damien definitely remembered that this moment had happened before, and he now knew he was back in it again. His sister and mother begged him to calm down and think clearly. "Do you really want to kill Damien?" his mother said. Damien stared at his family, and their names became obvious again. His father, Paul Haxon, his mother, Marita Haxon, and his sister, Louise Haxon. He wanted to see their faces again. Damien immediately started to cry silently in front of his family, who didn't understand why he was crying so quickly. His sister asked in wonder if Damien was really crying, and his mother, who was extremely sad, said that maybe everything had gotten too hard for him. His father interrupted the pause of the harsh query, asking what kind of apology Damien had made this time and encouraging him to speak up if he had something to say. But Damien calmly and clearly said, "I have no excuses." His father was clearly shocked by the unexpected answer. He kept saying, "No excuses?" He couldn't believe it. He asked how Damien, who always offered lame excuses, could say something like that suddenly. Damien calmly and plainly said that he had damaged the honor of House Haxon with his faults, and that he would take full responsibility without making any excuses. His father still didn't believe him, and thought Damien was just trying to get out of trouble. He stated he wouldn't let him off so easily. Damien then stood up straight and bowed slightly to his father, who was surprised and confused by what Damien meant when he said, "I will take care of it." Damien then started to walk away, informing his family that he would go fix the situation he had made himself. He stopped for a moment at the door, turned to his father, and said that he would come back to get the punishment he deserved after he had taken care of the problem. Damien smiled with great assurance as he left the house, promising them that he would return back to accept whatever punishment his father chose once everything was settled. His family were quiet and shocked when he went. The father was visibly confused and wondered out loud if Damien had hit his head and changed his mind, since his behavior was so weird and sudden. Damien got to the commercial city, which is recognized for its tall buildings and famous landmarks. Victor, his servant, told him that they had arrived at their objective as they went through the city together. Victor glanced worriedly at Damien and inquired whether he was really going to go into a place that was said to be supported by a criminal group. He was afraid that something might go wrong. Damien calmly told Victor that he could go home first if he was scared, but Victor insisted on staying with him even though he was scared. Damien smiled at Victor and told him not to worry. He was just going to say sorry to the owner of the place, and nothing awful would happen. He told Victor that he would take care of everything and come back. Damien kept heading toward the intended spot, and Victor followed him, praying that everything would go well. Damien thought again about how he had gotten back to the past in such a bizarre way as he walked alone. However, he promised himself that he would never hurt his family again, and that he would not waste the chance that fate, or maybe the divine, had given him. As he went around the city, he promised himself that he would repair each mistake he had done in the past. Two individuals who seemed suspicious saw him while he was walking. One of them was shocked to see him again. The two men came up to him and asked him in a very rude way why he had come back after they had told him not to show his face again. Damien glanced at them and tried to remember something about their faces. Even after all this time, they felt strangely familiar. He calmly and firmly said that he had merely come to say sorry to the owner for the trouble he had caused last time. The two men looked at him in shock for a time, and then they started to make fun of him. One of them laughed and said he would tell the supervisor about the apology, while the other looked startled by how kind Damien was acting. One of them said that he had heard that Damien was the irresponsible oldest son of a bad family, but he appeared more reasonable today than they had thought he would be. Then they started to make fun of him in a nasty way, stating they had heard about Damien's lovely sister and started talking about her in a rude and unpleasant way. One of them held Damien's face hard and sneered, saying he wanted him to declare he was sorry right away and that he should sacrifice his lovely sister in exchange for forgiveness. The man then observed something weird happening, and Damien felt a strong wrath and disdain rise up inside him. Damien quickly took the knife from the man's hand and stood in front of him, calmly waving it. He said he thought he could swiftly settle the issue and come back without any problems, but it looked like he had overrated himself this time. The other man got angry and started yelling, then tried to hit Damien again. But before he could reach him, he was hit with a swift and forceful blow that cut off his hand. The second man was shocked to see that his face was badly hurt, and the whole event quickly turned into shock and confusion. Damien stood his ground firmly against the men who had attacked him, and a horrible dark aura came from him that shocked everyone around. Damien said in a calm voice that he would show these men what they really wanted to see. Then he ran toward them at an amazing speed. He braced himself with a lot of strength, and a scary shadow emerged behind him. People watching couldn't believe how reckless the infamous oldest son of House Haxon really was. Victor, the servant, observed from a distance, shaking with worry as he shouted out to his young lord. Victor started yelling out of anger and fear, telling Damien that he had promised to take care of it personally. At the same time, screams and shouts started to come from the building that Damien had gone into. Some people standing by wanted to see inside, but one of them told the others not to get involved, or they might get into trouble. Damien stood calmly in front of the two men who had attacked him and inquired if they even knew who he was. He then answered his own question by saying that he didn't care who they were, and that he was there to finish what they had started. One of the men yelled in rage, saying they were from the Black Serpent Gang, a group that no one in this city would dare to mess with without getting into trouble. Damien's recollection became crystal clear as soon as he heard the name. He remembered more about the Black Serpent Gang, like how they ruled the streets and scared everyone in the city. He remembered how these same men had beaten him badly and humiliated him only because he complained about a high bill at one of the gang's businesses. He remembered how the gang's men ridiculed and beat him up until he had to give in totally. Damien smiled a dark and scary smile as memories came flooding back. He understood that he was the one who really needed an apology. One of the gang members started to threaten Damien, claiming that this time he wouldn't go easy on him simply because he was a noble. Then he got ready to hit him. The man charged toward Damien with all his strength, swinging his weapon. Damien was ready. Damien easily avoided the attack, leaving the man shocked and unable to understand what had just happened. The gang member fell to the ground in anguish and started coughing up blood. Damien walked up to him in a calm but scary way and claimed that even if he killed every gang member, it wouldn't be enough to assuage his anger. He held his firearm over the man's head, but at the last second, he stopped himself for the sake of his family. Even though the man begged and begged, Damien hit him hard, and it had a huge effect. After the hit, both men were on the ground in terrible pain and couldn't move. As he watched the event unfold from a distance, another gang member yelled loudly, asking who this individual was who had caused so much trouble. Damien quickly ran across another bunch of gang members who were ready to fight. The head of the new group asked Damien if he was part of another group and whose faction he was in. Damien calmly and firmly said that he wasn't part of any group. He had come to apologize, but now he was the one who wanted an apology from the owner of the place for what had transpired. The gang boss didn't trust what Damien said and told him that if he didn't come quietly, they would have to use force. Then the commander pointed at Damien and told the group to attack. The gang members ran toward Damien with alarming speed, and he braced himself again, feeling a little tired from all the fights. He took a big breath to get ready for the fight, and his face showed that he was determined and ready. Damien started a battle with quick, accurate moves, avoiding the gang members' blows and hitting them with forceful, quick strikes that were surprisingly strong. The gang members were shocked and in pain, shouting in anguish and uncertainty over what was going on. Their boss stood still, watching his men fall one by one. Even though Damien was very strong, he was really tired and knew that even this modest exertion had already made him out of breath. Then Damien asked the gang leader if he still wanted to fight, but to his astonishment, the leader backed away in fear and begged Damien to forgive him. Damien, on the other hand, didn't take the apology very well. He charged at the man again, this time with scary speed, which made the man run away screaming in fear. The scared leader ran away in a panic, wanting to get away from Damien's anger that couldn't be stopped. Inside the tavern, everything were calm. People were talking and didn't know what was going on outside. But soon the strange sounds from outside had their attention, and they stopped for a while to listen. At that moment, the leader of the gang came into the tavern in a panic, mumbling to himself in a shaky voice that he had lost control of the situation. He was in amazement when he suddenly remembered that Damien was just behind him. Damien talked to the man in a sarcastic way, threatening him and told him he should have listened when he was still being courteous. Damien threw the gang leader across the tavern with a lot of force, which shocked and drew the attention of everyone around. Damien quickly understood the dilemma he had put himself in after doing that. His expression showed shock and disbelief. Things immediately fell apart at the place. The guests started to scream and run in fright, yelling that there was a killer and telling everyone to get out. After the first fright, Damien stood quietly in the middle of the room, sure that he had dealt with the worst portion of the problem. But soon, a new voice spoke from above and asked what was going on. Anderson Holm, the tavern owner, came in looking irate and shocked that his guards were gone. Damien answered calmly and with clear confidence that he had dealt with the guards properly. This made the tavern owner even more angry and shocked. Anderson couldn't believe what he saw as he glanced at his hurt men. He was amazed that this young man had been able to beat members of the Black Serpent gang so effortlessly. He wanted to know who Damien was and why he thought it was okay to cause trouble in his business. Damien plainly and proudly said his entire name, Damien Haxon. This made Anderson look even more startled when he understood that Damien was a noble from the Haxon line. Damien made it clear that he wasn't there to stir trouble. He was there to get an apology from the pub owner personally. Anderson couldn't understand this, but Damien went on to say that this location used to charge crazy prices, and when he complained, gang members beat him up and humiliated him, an occurrence that gave him a bad name as a drunken troublemaker in the city. Damien then remembered the day his father kicked him out of the house for acting badly over and over again. He went on to say that the episode had cost his family a lot of money and caused them a lot of pain. But Anderson made fun of what Damien said in a cynical way, saying that maybe he was mourning his lost honor. Then he added with derision that he didn't think House Haxon had any honor left to lose in the first place. Anderson sought to get Damien angry by making fun of him and calling him pitiful. He stated he would never say sorry and instead demanded that Damien pay for the damage he had done. Damien smiled quietly and mysteriously, knowing that he might have forgiven the man if he had just said sorry nicely. But now that the man had decided to fight, Damien had no choice but to do what he had to do. In a quick and surprising moment, Damien got ready to take one last big step, which shocked Anderson and made him brace himself for what was about to happen. Damien started moving toward his opponent above with an astonishing pace, which shocked everyone in the room. He made a clear warning, saying that his opponent would pay dearly for what he had said earlier. Damien's expression showed a ferocious determination. Damien's eyes flashed with a piercing, frightening light as he was ready to stab someone with his knife. A very swift and unexpected movement came toward Damien, all of a sudden, catching him off guard and surprising him. A fierce fight broke out, sending out a strong and beautiful aura that startled Damien with how strong it was. The aura knocked Damien to the ground, and Anderson looked from above with a mix of admiration and worry. Anderson came out from behind the strange knight and said hello to him with evident relief, calling him Lord Ted. Damien was amazed that someone like Lord Ted would be working in a place like this. Damien was shocked and silently wondered why a knight would be in such a place at that moment. The knight known as Ted was fully visible, wearing a beautiful suit of armor. Some of his face was hidden in the shadows, which made people even more afraid of him.